We're gonna continue our covenant series, and we're gonna follow with the patriarchs. So I'm gonna be going through the three patriarchs. We're gonna leave a lot on the table. So definitely on your spare time, there's a lot there that I'm gonna be going through and going past. But there's a reason God called himself the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When we see God's interaction with man, Adam, Noah, we see a general interaction with humanity. But it starts with Adam, that God sets aside a people. This begs the question, why? Why was it that the Jews was who God chose? He could have had, we could have had, he could have had his own, he could have revealed himself to everyone, to every nation, to every, but he chose a people to go through. It was, he could have made himself known to all peoples in their own way. And I don't know if I can give you necessarily a good answer today, but I can say of all of Noah's children, they all had access to God. And I can tell you, when you look at the patriarchs, they are not necessarily great men of their age. There were pharaohs. There were government officials. There were nations that were much affluent and much more powerful than, quote unquote, the Abraham and the patriarchs, warlords that were more powerful at that time. In fact, I would say the patriarchs were better. They're better than average. Abraham was a wealthy man. And we do find that there is, these men are not destitute. But in relation, if you're a God that was come out to speak to a people, you're choosing regular men. You're choosing ordinary men. They were not destitute, but overall they were ordinary men. In fact, they had ordinary problems. They all struggled in their own way. Abraham, Isaac, they lied about their wives. Jacob was a deceiver. But in the end, the common thread between these three men is that they all had faith in God. Almost as if God says, I don't need someone that's perfect. I don't need a perfect people. I just need people that's going to believe. I need people that will put their trust in me. Hebrews 11:6 says, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Without faith it is impossible to please God. That is the vital ingredient that we look at, is our belief in God. God can take that belief. As long as you believe in him, God can take that and use it. I think when we come to God, we have these preconceived notions of what it takes. Maybe I'm just not ready to live a good life, or I'm just not ready to I'm waiting for this. We all have these notions in our head of what it takes before we come to God. And God simply only says, I just need your faith. I just need you to believe. I need you to believe that I am who I say I am, and that I'm going to reward you if you seek me. God only needs faith. It is the only missing ingredient required for God to work in your life. And while the patriarchs have failed in some ways, where they excelled was in their faith. Another thought I had, of course, who would know the mind of Christ? I'm just speculating here. But if God truly wanted us to come together, this would be a way to do it. When I think about my children, I can buy that pack of M&Ms, and when I'm going to have to distribute those equally. They're going to see what they have. In fact, just for me and myself, I was raised with my cousin. She's more like a sister to me. But we even wanted the same colors. She's got too many green M&Ms. She's got too many of those. So we had to cut it in such a way where it was equal amount of M&Ms and equal amounts of colors. That's how kind of petty we got. But we could do that. You could give each blessing to each person. Say, here's your blessing. Here's your blessing. Here's your blessing. Here's your blessing. And when you do that, you prevent. We've got our blessing and we move on. But if I go to my oldest and say, here's the pack of M&Ms, and I want you to distribute this out equally, that's a different thing. Now it's going to force them to get along. It's going to force them to interact. It's going to force them to come together and have a solution as to how it's going to work. Again, just my thought on it is it would require us to cooperate and have a form of toleration with each other. Again, why God chose Jesus, why God chose the Jews, I cannot say, but Jesus was a Jew. He was the root of David. He is the bright morning star that brought salvation to the world. And you can see the enemy attempt to drive a wedge between the world and the Jews. I believe the world statistics of this is there are 0.2% of the world that is considered Jewish. 0.2%. I'm not going to get political here, so I'm not going to go that round, but it's astounding to me to see the immediate backlash of anti-Semitism just one day after the October 7th attack. Now, you can judge the actions that they do now. That's fair to judge it now. But before you judge, understand that just one 9/11 with us prompted us to overthrow 2 countries and bomb any country that harbored any terrorist. And again, you can criticize the actions, but understand that there's a spiritual undercurrent here. There's something there that if they can just show that this isn't right, if they can add that wedge in there. And as we go back to the patriarchs, another feature, none had a claim on God. Abraham was 99. Isaac was the younger son. Jacob was also the younger. They weren't worthy because what they brought to God or their heredity. God chose them all. There's something about God that the word makes clear. In Matthew 20:16, it says, "So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many are called, but few chosen." The concept that the last shall be first and the first shall be last, God chose the backwater of Galilee, the son of a carpenter, to live this life in this world. He chose uneducated fishermen as mouthpieces of the gospel, the disciples. It was the words of Jesus that said, "Sell all you have," to be careful about the love of money and worldly accolades. One of the early criticisms of Christianity by the pagans of that day was it was a religion of women and slaves. These were not the kings. These were not people with power. These were people that did not have power. And modern prosperity preachers would tell you that if you weren't rich, God's not with you. That's the sign that God's got God's going to bless you and give you the mansion and the house, and not to say that God's not going to do that, and God can do that, but understand that, and of course they're going to say this when they show you their gold-plated prayer rooms and private jets, that this is what God wants, but those are not the words of Jesus. Of course, we're not against the blessings of God, but if your dreams are private jets and Gucci bags, this is not the DNA of God. This is not the DNA of Christ. This is not what God has. In fact, if I had a recruiting poster for the early church and said, "Hey, you believe in this man Jesus, and you're going to be ridiculed. They're probably going to kill you, and you're not going to be rich. You're not going to get any worldly accolades. You ready to sign up?" This is kind of the story that Christianity has. And of course, we live in a nation of abundance where we can live this way, but understand that this was not the DNA of Christ. This is not the DNA of God. It's always going to be the first shall be last and last shall be first. And this is the God I serve. In Philippians 2:5-8. And Paul says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation. He was humble, and took himself the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in the fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even unto the death of the cross." We are to be Christ-like. This is Christ. It's to be humble. It's to be in that form of a servant. It's to make yourself of no reputation. To be obedient to God unto death. This is the call that we have. Not a call to private jets, not a call to mansions and things. It's a call to be a servant, to be humble. Our God takes the form of a servant. And if your spirituality doesn't include being humble and being more servant-like, you may need to reread the Bible. You may need to look at it again and understand kind of what you're going for, because this is the God we serve is here to. It's a humbling faith. It's a servant faith. It's something where our reward is not in this world. It's going to be later on. And we open to the covenant. Interesting, this was given to Abraham at the age of, he was 99 years of age when he got this. And the story of Abraham, we're about to camp next week for the next generation. And I'm going to have a great time. I love the setup they have out there. It's great for the kids and everything. But I will assure you, the day after that weekend's over, I'm gonna go to my bed and I'm gonna be thankful for the bed that I have. Camping's fun, but it's not something that you want to do all the time. I'm gonna be thankful for my home and the bed and the AC that I have. But if you can imagine Abraham, he's from the city of Ur, and this is the most cosmopolitan city of his time. This is like the New York City of that area. And God says, you know what? You're going to leave all that behind, and you're going to go live in tents in the wilderness. You can imagine going to like Arizona desert. I'm trying to think of a sparse place in the United States and say, go leave your home, take your family, and go live out in a tent in the desert. That's where I want you to be. This is what Abraham did. This is the choice that Abraham made. And it's the faith of Abraham here in Genesis 12:4. So Abraham departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So God says, go. As the Lord spoke to him, Abraham said, I will go. No complaints, no but I, no whatabouts. I will go as the Lord spoke to me. This is the faith that God wants. This is the faith that God desires. This is the reason Abraham got that covenant, because he believes. He trusted in God. It's this faith, again, all it takes is faith in God through his whole lot with Abraham. In Genesis 17, 1 through 8, I think we did it. I think Sammy Cheryl did this, or maybe it was Pastor, but we doing a lot of scriptures where we kind of doubled it. But this is the covenant that God made with Abraham. So when Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. And Abraham fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name be any more called Abraham, but thy name shall be called Abraham. For the father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and you, and thy seed after thee, and their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto you, and thy seed after thee. I will make you fruitful. Kings will come from you. This is an everlasting covenant. One thing I want you to, when you look at the modern events and news stories, I want you to filter this lens. Even if you see things that you don't agree with, this is an everlasting covenant made by God to Abraham. God is gonna back up his covenant. No matter whether you believe, no matter the nations believe, no matter what the issue is, there's a covenant here that God made, and he's going to keep his word. I'm going to go quickly through Abraham. And of course, he tried to rush the plan of God, going into Hagar. So she birthed Ishmael, which is a son of Abraham also. Now, interesting, the covenant was for his sons, his generations. So even though Ishmael is not of the promise, he still got that blessing. Ishmael got a blessing that fell from his father Abraham. And Genesis 17:20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard, this is God speaking. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. And of course, Ishmael is the father of the Arab nations. When you read the Quran, it starts with Ishmael. The the oldest son is what they say. And again, but this promise, Ishmael is the father of the Arab nations, but the promise was Isaac. The miraculous pregnancy, the birth of Sarah, that Sarah had with Isaac. Genesis 17:21 says, "But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year." Again, this is God flipping the natural order. You understand, if you look at this, you would say, well, naturally, God will go with Ishmael. He's the oldest. That is the way things were done. It's the natural order of things. The oldest gets it. God says, no, I'm going to bless it in my way. I'm going to do it the way that I'm going to fulfill my word the way I want it to be flipped. And God is flipping that natural order. And of course, interesting, Muslims claim Ishmael as the son of the covenant because he was the firstborn. Here, God chooses his own path for his blessing. Isaac hears from God and establishes covenant. And this is Genesis 26, 3 through 4. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make, I'm going to keep going there. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven. And I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So here we have the same covenant that God made with Abraham. He reiterates this now to Isaac. And of course, we know the story. Isaac has twins in Genesis 25, 23 through 26. And this is God speaking to Rebekah. 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days of delivery were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's feet, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when he bare them. I thought here that when I was reading this, God told Rebekah that the oldest was going to serve the younger. But apparently when you look at the story, Isaac didn't get that memo. So, it's unclear as to whether Isaac understood that and just disregarded that, or whether Rebekah just, because you can see later on Rebekah is kind of, she's instrumental in some of this stuff that happens. It's unclear whether she's doing it to be deceitful or whether she's truly just living the plan of God that God had told her to do when she had the twins. I thought that was interesting to see that. I never did that. But when I read the story of Jacob and Esau, it breaks my heart as a parent. I don't have siblings. I can't tell you what it's like to have that sibling rivalry. But I know people that have, and I see my kids. Again, that M&M packet. If there's one M&M that if one gets one M&M more than the other, they're going to notate. They're going to know that. They're going to look down at that. In fact, my daughter, my 8-year-old, she'll come up. Remember that time when you got him a toy? You didn't get me a toy? Like there's this natural accounting that siblings have, and again, it breaks my heart when you read the story because you see the seed sown by Isaac and Rebekah. As only child, I never experienced this rivalry, but even any favoritism, even unintended, the children feel. They can see it. And as we see this play out in the narrative, Genesis 25, 27 through 28, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Esau was a cunning hunter. He's a man of the field. He's a man's man. I think if we had Esau and Jacob here today, man, we would just be all over Esau. Strapping, hunter, provider. He's everything that we would want our masculine men to be. This was Esau. And of course, Jacob was different. Jacob was, was a man of the tents. He was an inside kid, and I can understand Isaac. You can imagine, Isaac was the son of promise. He had a brother Ishmael, but Ishmael got banished. He got pushed away. So it was only Isaac. And you understand, I don't remember how old Sarah was when she had Isaac, but, this was a promise. This is the one son that God gave them. It ain't going to happen again, or at least God didn't give it to him again. Sarah had him in old age. And you can imagine Sarah probably watched him a little bit closer. There may be times when it was time to go hunting, and maybe Sarah was like, no, Isaac's going to stay here with me. You go out and take the servants and go hunt. You go out and do your thing, because he is my only child. He is the one, the promise of God. This is that I have to protect this promise. And, I'm sure Sarah watched him a little bit closer, and God didn't give her another child, so we don't know. But you can, and then you can just think in your mind, when Abraham comes back from the mountain and he says, yeah, God told me we're going to sacrifice Isaac. And you can see Sarah thinking, you did what? You were going to kill our only promised son? God told, So you can imagine this thing as a mother, no, you don't understand. God gave us a ram. It's all good now. But you can imagine Sarah saying, okay, Isaac's not going with Dad ever again. we're going to make sure that he's going to stay close to the house. We're going to make sure that he's covered. Again, I'm sure Sarah made sure he was never put in harm's way. And you can see that. You can see in Esau that maybe Esau was what Isaac never was. Maybe this was something that Isaac wanted to be. Esau was everything that he was not. Fully, these are just my thoughts of the reading. This is not anything that's biblical or anything like that. But Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. And it's this rivalry that played itself out. Again, Jacob was a mama's boy. He was a man of the tents. He stayed inside. And you can hear the brothers, and you can see this tear the brothers apart. And we had the story of the lentils in Genesis 25, 29 through 34. Genesis. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, that the same red pottage, for I am faint. And pottage is another word for lentils. For I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point of death. To what profit shall this birthright mean to me? And Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he swore unto him and sold his birthright unto Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now the story here was not Esau selling his birthright. You look farther on the story, they still had to do the deceit with Isaac. So there was something where even with what just happened in the lentils, didn't quite convey everything to Jacob. So when I look at this, it's really not that. The story for me was that it was even for sale. That birthright was even there to be sold. You understand, he traded the eternal for the here and now. There are some things in my possession that they're just not for sale. There are guns that I've got from family members that you could not buy them from me. They are family heirlooms. There are things that it's going to pass on to my children. It's the things that's going to pass on to their kids. There are things in our lives as Christians that are not for sale. There are things that we have to have that are eternal, that no matter what the price, whatever what we can gain in this world, they're not for sale. He traded the eternal for the here and now, the pleasures of sin for a season. 1 John 2, 16 through 17. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is going to go away. And all the lusts that vex you in this world, they're going to go away too. But he that does the will of the Father, will of God, lives forever. The world is passing away. All these things that we want, all these things that we desire, the things that we sacrifice our eternal life for the pleasures of sin for a season, they're all going to go away. And that's one thing about sin. The more that you partake, the less of effect you're going to have. It's the famous story with the tolerance of drugs. You know, when people overdose on drugs, the issue is that your tolerance, you need more of that drug to get that same high. And so eventually there's a point where you take so much of that drug where it kills you because you have that tolerance. And this is what sin does for us. We do these things, and, you know, if we can just understand that there are things that are not for sale. If Esau valued his birthright, to just be able to deal with the discomfort of skipping a meal. Now, it says he's to death, but, you know, there's a part of me that says, I think I read that a man can live multiple weeks before starvation begins to even affect the body. So to say that he was at the brink of death, and, he just didn't want to go through that discomfort of missing a meal. He was hungry at the moment, and it was that moment that he chose to sell his birthright, because the core idea is in verse 34 when he says he despised his birthright. That's the idea here. It wasn't that he sold it, it was that he didn't value it. He didn't value it enough to not sell it. There's also a theme of selfishness here. There was a double portion of inheritance, which, as a man of the field, as a man that can live off the land, I don't know if the money was important to him. I could be wrong on that. But more importantly, what the birthright gave was spiritual leadership. You understand, it was not the money that you got as well. As a firstborn, it wasn't just a double portion of the inheritance. You were responsible for the family. You were responsible for those under you. You were supposed to take care of mom. You're supposed to take care of your siblings. You're going to take care of the whole patriarch. That was your job. So you understand that this could also be an idea of Esau saying, you know what? I don't want that responsibility. I want to live for the now. I want to live in the now. So it wasn't just the giving up of the inheritance, but it's also a responsibility and spiritual leadership of the family for the people under his care. And I'm going to kind of go through verse 27. Ooh, we got plenty of time. I was going to read this whole thing, but I think that might be too much. But kind of just paraphrasing things. Genesis 27, 1 through 4. And it came to pass, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son and said to him, my son. And he said to him, behold, here I am. And see, behold, now I am old. I know not the day of my death. Therefore I pray thee, take thy weapons and thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field and make me some venison. And make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, and my soul shall bless thee before I die. So this is Isaac on his deathbed. And he's ready to give the blessing. And he tells Esau one last time, that give me that, get some of that venison that I love. So you know that venison, all the times I've told you to do it before, go ahead and do it for me again. Just one last time, and I'm going to give you the blessing that you wanted. And of course, we hear that Rebecca hears this. She hears this interaction, and she goes to Jacob and says, okay, I heard Isaac just said to Esau he's going to give the blessing. So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you this meat. What's funny is she had venison there on site, and she knew how to make it because it's mom. And, and so Rebecca says, go and they concoct this deception where, go to the flock and get some wool, and we're gonna put goat skins on your hands, because Esau's hairy, and you're I'm gonna give you some of Esau's clothes, his clothes from the field, all the stuff he works outside in. We're gonna make you Esau. We're gonna pass you off as Esau. And like I said, what's funny is Jacob says, they're going to call me a deceiver if I do this. This is wrong. And Rebecca says, don't worry about it. That's on me. I'll take the heat on that. But, of course, so we get to that point, and they make this skins for his hands and his arms, and they put the clothes on Esau, and they prepare the bread and the meat, and they take it to Isaac. And, verse 18 says, and he came to his father and said, my father, and he said, here am I. He said, who are you? And Jacob said, I'm Esau. I'm your firstborn. I've done according as you had told me. Here, eat. And again, it's on there. And Isaac said to him, how is it that you have found it so quickly? And because the Lord, and of course, Jacob said, because God brought it to me. And he said, pray thee that I may feel thee, because he could hear Jacob's voice. He doesn't hear Esau. He hears Jacob's voice. And he says, come here, let me feel you. And of course, he feels the goat skins and realized that it was hairy. And then he smells the clothes. And, for whatever reason, Isaac said, okay, this is Esau, and it's time to give the blessing. And so he gives the blessing, and the blessing of the firstborn. And of course, verse 41, I'm going to get down. And so Esau comes back and says, I'm back, Dad. I've got the venison. I'm ready for my blessing. And Isaac says, I already gave your blessing. I already gave it. There's nothing left for me to give. And Esau says, wait a minute, you can give me something. You're going to give me something. And so there's a blessing that Jacob gives, but it's going to be, listen, you're going to be serving your brother. You're going to serve the younger until you become strong enough to break that yoke. But in the meantime, he's going to be ahead of you, and you're going to be, essentially under his control or under his care. And in verse 41, Esau says, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. When it's over, I'm going to slay my brother Jacob. Brothers killing brothers. We have got to the point now where there is now death threats. So I'm going to kill Jacob for this favoritism, this thing, because I didn't get what I thought was coming to me. I'm going to kill him. And of course, Rebecca hears this. Rebecca's always around. And she hears this, and she tells Jacob, he says, go. You got to go. He's going to kill you. This is what he said. And what's funny, let's see. Oh, in verse 45, just an interesting thought. And you say, go away to my brother Laban, until my brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forgets what you have done, and I will send and fetch him. Because why should I also deprive the both of you in one day? She knew Esau was gone. She knew Esau was out the door, and she said, I'm not going to lose both my sons. So she sends Jacob away, and again, she was complicit in this. So I don't know, but again, God had told her that the youngest was going to be there. So whether she was fulfilling that or not, but she sends Jacob off. And of course, the final words of Esau says, I'm going to kill my brother. And Jacob is sent away. And on the way, he sees this Jacob's ladder dream, where he's had the angels go up and down. And God reiterates the covenant and says, you're the promise. You're going to get this promise. Genesis 28, 13 through 15. And behold, the Lord stood above, this is above the Jacob's ladder and the angels. He said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land where thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and I will keep thee in all places, whither thou goest, whether I bring thee against into this land. For I will not leave you until I have done which I have spoken to you. Take note, God is telling Jacob, I have you. I got you. I'm never going to leave you. This promise is for you, and I'm not going to leave you until it gets fulfilled. And then in the universal law of sowing and reaping, Jacob the deceiver goes to Laban and gets deceived for Rachel. And of course, that's the 7 years, and he marries Leah. And then the second, he works another 7 years and gets Rachel. And then there's conflict with Laban. Jacob makes his way back. With this conflict, Jacob decides it's time to go back home. It's time to go back to where I came from. And this is 14 years. I could be wrong on that, but I know for sure that he worked 14 years for both his wives. And God does something when Jacob enters his country, the land of promise, the promised land that God gave them. Genesis 32, 1 through 2. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." Another word for that is army. This is God's army. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Something. Understand, the first time we talked about Jacob's ladder, that was a dream. This was a live physical angel that Jacob saw in front of his face. And as he's entering the promised land, God says, "You see these angels? You see this army?" He's re-entering that promise. I've got you. You are protected. You have everything you need at your disposal. I'm here for you. God is reiterating that God has Jacob. This is the army of God. Again, God doubles down on Jacob and says, "Okay, I got you. You did this. This is we got this covered." Yet Jacob is consumed with fear over Esau. Upon seeing an army of angels, he's more scared of Esau than he is of that. But he remembers 14 years ago that Esau was going to kill him. And he doesn't remember the promises of God. For some reason, he doesn't remember that God said, "I've got you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure, because I made a promise. I made a covenant with you and your father before you." But instead, he allowed his fear to be greater than the promises of God. And of course, that's a story for us today to ensure that, when we look at things in the future, we get anxious, we get anxiety. We see, we're concerned about how things are going to play out. What we don't understand is that God has us protected. God has us. God has everything around us. He has given us that promise that God's going to take care of us. But it was the fear that overcame, almost putting fear above God himself. So he sends oxen, he sends donkeys, he sends flocks and servants to find favor with Esau. He's going to try and buy him off. This is Jacob being Jacob. Jacob the deceiver, trying to, through crook and nook, he's going to try and win this thing. And he sends all these people ahead of time, and the word gets back to him, and the word is, Esau's coming to you, and he's bringing 400 men with him. And you can read in the story where, it says that he was greatly afraid and distressed. He knows what his brother said 14 years ago, and he's bringing 400 men with him. Now, if I was Esau and I knew I was bested twice by Jacob, I'm coming with men. You're going to get me a third time. Of course, we see later on that's not the case, but you can see Esau coming out saying, maybe this is what was going on, but instead of leaning on the promises of God, again, he was afraid. He was distressed. He was allowing fear to overcome him. He even sends his wives and his children ahead of him. Not sure if he was protecting them by removing himself from that situation, or whether he was using them for sympathy. Hey, Esau, take a look. I got kids too. You don't want to kill me. I don't know. I'm just speculating on that part of it. But we're now at the point where Jacob has no assets. He sent all his stuff ahead of him. He's got no kids. He's got no family. He's got nothing. Genesis 32:24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Jacob was alone. It was only him. He didn't have his bank account. He didn't have his servants. He didn't have his family. He didn't have any friends. It was only him. He was all alone. And when you are alone, no family, no friends, no wealth, it's just you and God. That's where God wants you. And I don't see here where it says Jacob sought out a man. As we look at Jacob, this is not a fighter. This is not a man that was a fighter. I'm sure, but it was a man that wrestled with Jacob. And God found him. God separated him. God found him and sought him. And I'm thankful for a God that seeks me out and is willing to wrestle with me. If I didn't care about my children, I would let them live whatever life they want, because I don't care what they do. But because I care for them, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to wrestle with them. I'm going to challenge them. I'm going to, you sure you believe that? Or you really want to do that? Or this is the choice you want to make? I'm going to wrestle with them. I'm going to fight, but I'm going to challenge them. And this is God challenging Jacob, saying, okay, you don't understand. I've given you 2 promises, and you still don't get it. I'm going to wrestle. We're going to figure this out. And like I said, I'm thankful for a God that seeks me, that wrestles with me, that convicts me, that tells me when I'm doing wrong, that tells me what I need to do right. And he wrestles with this sinful man. And God wrestles with us when we are all alone, when we've lost everything that we have, when God takes everything away from us. And it's at that point when he's wrestling with you. Okay, what now? What are you going to do now? Verse 25. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him and touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. When you are alone, he said he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Like Job, God took the source of his strength. You understand, this was all that Jacob had left. He had nothing else in his life except the strength, his body, his health, the thing the wrestling that was required. And God touched his hip and said, okay, what are you going to do now? I haven't wrestled. I never wrestled any what is it? I haven't wrestled in high school or anything like that. But they say that the hips are everything. The hips are where your power is. I know when you're hitting a baseball, you got to go through the hips, and everything is through the hips. Your source of strength, everything you're trying to do on your own, your hip is involved. And this is where God takes that away and says, okay, now what? Now what are you going to do? Are you going to quit? Because now you got nothing. Now there's nothing left. Again, like Job, God took away the source of his strength. Okay, Jacob, what are you going to do now? How are you going to respond? How are you going to respond when you've got nothing and your health is in shambles? What is your response now? In verse 26, and he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And Jacob said, I will not let you go, except you bless me. I will not let you go until you bless me. That's it, Jacob. That's what God wanted. He wanted that never let go, that faith that never stops, that no matter what, whether I lost my family, whether I lose my home, whether I lose my health, whether I lose everything, I am never letting you go, because that's the covenant that God has. He wants to make sure that covenant, because he's going to give you that. I know Cheryl, Sammy Cheryl talked about Job, and he's going to give all that back to us. Whatever you lost, God can make that up for you. He's going to make it. But what he wants to know is that at that point, are you going to let go? Are you going to be like Esau and deny that birthright and sell it? Sell your birthright for the sin of the pleasures of sin for a season. And Jacob, and again. That's it, Jacob. That's what God was looking for. In Genesis, in verse 27 through 28. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So as soon as Jacob says, I'm never going to let you go, God says, what's your name? And Jacob says, Jacob. Okay, Jacob the deceiver. That's what Jacob means. It means deceit. You're no longer going to be deceived. You're no longer a deceiver. You're a new man. You're a new person. I'm going to give you a new name. You're not going to be named deceiver no more. You're going to have a new name, Israel. You are going to struggle, but if you persevere, if you never let go, I got you. I'm going to keep that promise in your life. I'm going to be there till the very end. In Genesis 32, 30 through 31, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Jacob said, I have seen God face to face. And now he has a permanent limp. You know, God never healed his hip. You know, did he pray for it? That wasn't, the issue is that now he has a constant reminder of never letting go of God. This, and you can imagine the next morning when he wakes up and, bloody, dirty, just disheveled, showing up to the camp all messed up. What just happened, Jacob? I don't know. I saw God face to face, and I persevered. And why are you limping, Jacob? God crippled me. He took my strength, but yet I'm never letting go. The story, and Paul speaks about this, about the thorn in the flesh, in 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 9. For this thing I besought the Lord 3 times, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my strength, God's strength, is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly will I prefer glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Power is perfected in weakness. That crippling that Jacob got, it gave him power. Because it reminded him, every limp, every walk, every step he took, he remembered that promise that God had for him. That he was, that army of hosts, that God was going to take care of him. That God was going to be in that covenant relationship. Every time his hip hurt when he woke up in the morning, he remembered God has him. God has that. And it's in our weakness we are made strong. Power is perfected in weakness. Again, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. It's when we are the weakest is when God give us the most power. Because at that point, it's not you. If it's God, it has to be God. There's no way that Jacob could have prevailed over a man with a broken hip or with a messed up hip. It only was God that made him do it. And when you see, when we want people to see our lives, we don't want them to see Chris did this thing. Chris was talented. Chris did this. Chris did that. I want them to see God did that. God blessed his life. God did, it wasn't Chris, because you talk to Chris, it wasn't Chris. You want them to see the weakness, because it's in that weakness where we have our power. And it's that promise of God. The story of the patriarchs is that in their lives, the promise never came. Imagine praying for something that never comes to pass. In Hebrews 11:13 says, these are the patriarchs, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and they were persuaded, they believed them, and embraced them, and they were strangers and pilgrims of this earth. Each of them held on to the faith that they had. It was that ingredient that God used. It was that faith that they had in their lives that God used. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It was that faith, even though the promise was never fulfilled in their lives. They never got to the promised land. They never owned all the land that God told them to be. Abraham had one kid, two children, one promised child. Isaac had 2. Jacob finally has 12. So, this great nation that they're going to be ahead of, it never really happened in their lives, but they believed. They had faith. And that was all that God needed. God took ordinary men with ordinary lives and said, okay, if you put your trust in me, I'm gonna go all in on you. I'm going to give you that power. I'm going to give you the covenant. I'm going to be there until the end, because each had that faith. And it's that faith that is the essential ingredient. And that's all that God needs. He doesn't need our talents. He doesn't need he doesn't need anything from us, but just belief that God can do it, and that he's a rewarder of them, that if you seek him, God's going to give you what you need. And it's that ingredient that God used to bring forth his plan for mankind. Thank you.